So good morning. We are going to talk to you about our dyslexia program here in Hutto ISD. So first of all, I want you to know that students who struggle with reading and are identified with dyslexia learn best using a multisensory approach. We can use multiple senses to help them learn about their letters, their sounds. So some ways that we could use are tapping. So we tap out the letters and sounds, indicating each finger for each sound, or each tap for each sound. We do skywriting, where they're using large movements, hand movements, to help them cement some of those high frequency words that don't follow the typical patterns. Writing on the desk, whether they use a dry erase marker and they trace over those letters and erase them. Using sand, using shaving cream, something like that, and listening for sounds and phonological awareness. So Hutto ISD uses the Wilson Reading System, and that's our dyslexia intervention program. Wilson is a comprehensive, intensive program that is students second grade through high school. For our younger students that are in kinder and first, we do start them off with Foundations, which is also a Wilson product, and that's both of those programs are based on the phonological coding research that is Orton-Gillingham based. The overriding goal of the Wilson program is to have students independently reading grade level materials with ease, fluency, and understanding, and so that their comprehension grows. There are 6 syllable types that we use and that we look at in the Wilson Reading System, or WRS, you might hear me call it that. There's the closed syllable, the open syllable, the vowel consonant E, the final stable syllable, the R-controlled vowel, and the vowel pair, double vowel syllable. So Wilson follows a scope and sequence and builds on each skill. There are 12 steps or books that are in the program, and that all students, regardless of their age or ability, will typically start in book 1. We do a WADE, which is an assessment to determine whether they start on 1.1 or 1.3. The younger students might start at 1.1, and that starts with the letter sounds, if they don't have letter knowledge, sound knowledge. But most students, again, regardless of their age, will start at 1.3. Steps 1 through 3 focus on the closed syllable and closed syllable exception, along with Latin bases, suffix, and blends. Steps 4 through 5 and 6, cover the vowel consonant E syllable, the open syllable, and any additional suffixes or affixes, actually, because you'll have prefixes and suffixes. After step 3, students will start to work on multisyllabic words. So 1 and 2 will focus on one syllable, closed syllable words. 3 will then move into more than one syllable, but staying closed. And then 4 adds that vowel consonant E, so students will work with that syllable and then combining it in multisyllabic words with closed syllables. And then step 5 is the open syllable, which the multisyllabic words could include the open syllable, the closed syllable, or the vowel consonant E. And then step 6 focuses on the suffix endings. Steps 7 through 12 cover skills such as contractions, sound options, R-controlled syllables, vowel digraphs, and diphthongs, and advanced concepts in sound and letter patterns. Typically, if a student is identified early on, let's say in 2nd grade or 1st or 2nd grade, they would cover steps 1 through 6 in elementary age, and then 7 through 12 would be secondary. Middle school, the goal would be to get them completed by middle school so that when they get to high school, they no longer need the dyslexia services. However, they would continue with their accommodations. But you do get those students that don't get identified until 4th or 5th, and they might be in the program a little bit longer. So in a perfect world, they would finish the program in 3 to 4 years. So these are some of the commonly used terminology that Wilson uses, but you also use it in any reading instruction. Wilson uses terms like marking, scooping, and phrasing. Marking is when a student will identify the components of a word. So for example, if a word is thinks, it's not a very good K, they will identify the digraph with one line because it has one sound, 2 consonants that make one sound. They will put a box around the weld, indicating that that is a weld, and they'll put a circle on the suffix. The line will go under the whole word, indicating that that is a base word. And then they will mark the syllable type. This requires a breathe because it is a short vowel sound, indicating that it is a closed syllable. So they will mark the components of a word. Scooping would be when they identify the syllables in a word. So if we get into multisyllabic words, so a word like sunfish has more than one syllable. So you'll identify the first syllable, has a short vowel sound, it's closed. Fish has a digraph in it, and it is also closed syllable because of the short vowel sound. And then you would scoop it. Sunfish, sunfish. Phrasing is when a student reads a sentence and identifies the proper phrases to help with fluency. So if we had a sentence, they might scoop the phrases and then help them with their phrasing. A Wilson lesson has 10 parts. It should take 60 minutes for a lesson, 60 to 90 minutes in a perfect world, but we know that due to time constraints, most lessons have to be broken up into 2 days. So, into day cycles to complete them. So teachers will do parts 1 through 5, maybe on day 1, and then on day 2, you repeat part 1 and continue on with parts 6 through 9 and 10. And I'm gonna break down a little bit about what each of those lesson parts mean. So in part 1, we're using the cards, which are similar to the cards that are up here, the letter cards, to do a drill. And, excuse me, give me 1 second. Okay. And so the students are asked, we do the vowels first, and then we do the consonants, and then we do the digraphs, and we do the welds. And you do it in a random order because you don't want them to memorize it, but you do want to make sure that they know those letters and sounds. We cover also Latin bases as well. In part 2, this is the lesson part where we actually review the concepts that were previously taught in another step and then teach the next part, the new skill, and we might introduce a new skill, or we're doing a lesson for fluency in that new skill. So it's very much a spiral type of lesson where you're constantly reviewing something previous and adding something new to the skill. Part 3 is where we use word cards to practice words with the previous taught skill and teach the new skill. So the word cards are like flashcards, and you would have, we call them a fat stack, and it builds. So if the student is in book 3, step 3, you would have a stack for book 1, a stack for book 2, and a stack for book 3. And so they're constantly reviewing, spiraling the words that they've worked on before and adding the new cards. Part 4 is charting, and that is the decoding part of the lesson where the students have 15 words that they're going to read. We have a practice set. Usually you have a top set and a bottom set, and we practice with the top. Let's say you can choose the bottom or the top, but let's say we're going to do the top, and then the students are going to practice a few words, and then I actually time them to read the 15 words. The goal is to get 14 out of 15 words read correctly, real words, if within 45 seconds to have automaticity. And we also do nonsense words. So a lesson will take, maybe you might have 2 or 3 chartings of real words before you go on to the nonsense words. Once they've mastered those, then we go on to the next step. Part 5 is the decoding and fluency sentence reading part. Still a decoding part of the lesson where the students have 10 sentences. The teacher chooses maybe 5 to 6 sentences for the students to read. They all silently read if it's a group of students, even if it's one student, but you will have them silently read the sentences for understanding. And then you ask them to read them one more time, and they use their finger or their pencil tip to scoop the phrases and think about how they might phrase it. And then the third time that we're reading it, I usually ask a student to come up, I'm projecting it here, and they will show us where they scooped and phrased it. We also ask comprehension questions about the sentence. Maybe ask them, you know, what's going on in this, or what do you think, why do you think they did this, or why do you think they did that? We also ask them questions about the words, the skills that we're learning. So if our lesson is about digraphs, I might say, do you have any words in this sentence that have digraphs? Do you have any words in this sentence that have a suffix? What's the base word in that word? So we ask them questions about that. Part 6, this is the drill in reverse. So it's encoding, and we reverse it, where in part 1, I'm pointing to the card and they're telling me the sound. I am now saying the sound, and they have their magnetic journal, just like this one, with the tiles in front of them. And I will say, okay, say eh, and everybody says eh. Point to eh on your board, and everybody's pointing, hopefully, to the E, and so on. And so it's their chance to actually physically touch the tile and show me that they know what that sound is. In part 7, this is also an encoding step where students manipulate their tiles. So I will dictate a word, and they use the same tile board, and they will spell it. So if the word was think, I will put TH, and then they have a weld and think. So they're tapping it out, ink, THINK, finding the tiles, and then I tell them, okay, spell it away, THINK, and they put that back. So there's a lot of manipulating, and for them speaking, thinking, listening, and moving the tiles. Part 8 of the lesson is also encoding. It's dictation. So the students have a sheet. It's not really a test, however, it seems like it, because I'm dictating sounds. I'm dictating word elements like Latin bases or affixes. I dictate high frequency phrases so that they're practicing using their high frequency words, and I dictate a sentence. So the sentences will typically have a word from the new lesson, the new skill that we're working on, but it also will have words from the previous skills. And so students are also practicing, when we do the sentence, how to self-monitor their own spelling and their own sentence writing, to remember that you have a capital in the sentence, to remember that names are capitalized, to remember punctuation. And so that is the last step on part 8. Part 9 and 10, those are together because both of those are comprehension pieces of the lesson. A teacher can choose part 9 or part 10 to do within the lesson plan. Part 9 is typically going to be a controlled text that the teacher chooses. It's a passage, and the students will silently read it to gain understanding about it. So it's not a cold read when you're having them read it out loud, but they will read it one time. The second time they're reading, we're practicing fluency, we're practicing oral reading, and we're practicing vocabulary in that. If the teacher chooses to do part 10, that is where the teacher could use a chapter book or could use a picture book for this. And that the students are practicing their coherent mental model to help visualize the story and do picture notes. So it's a way to help them learn the strategy of drawing or doing a quick sketch of what is going on in the story to help them retell the story or the passage. So, any questions about that so far? Because there's a lot of information, and just, you're more than welcome to ask those questions. All right, so here are ways to help support students with dyslexia. These ideas are coming from David Kilpatrick, who is one of the leading researchers on reading instruction, and this comes from his book, one of his books on phonological awareness. And phonological awareness is the proficient automatic access to the sounds in spoken words. So you want to have explicit instruction. Typically multisensory is great. It can be done in large or small groups, but obviously with students who have dyslexia, you want to do it in a small group setting. You don't want to have more than 5 or 6 students in a group. It gets too much sometimes. So you definitely want to focus on that, having a small group. However, it's never a bad idea to do phonics with a large group. And his book provides you with quick 10-minute lessons that can be done whole group, but we also do it in our small group. We also use Hegarty too to help with phonological awareness too. It's very similar. But the lessons will have, rhyming, alliteration, first initial sounds, deleting, segmentation, isolation, manipulation, substitution. His lessons include using phonics to illustrate phonemic awareness, use tokens for sound, so it gives you some ideas of how to work with them. So just like we do the tiles or the tapping, students can use tokens to help, each sound. How do I spell chat? Ch, at, chat. Again, moving and multisensory. You want to reinforce segmenting skills using clapping or tapping or the puppet, a hand puppet. But when we teach syllables, I know when I was growing up, our teacher would say, how many syllables are in the word Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin. So again, clapping for syllables. You can do it for clapping for sounds as well. So he suggests using whisper or stretching and repeating sounds. I know that my students, when they struggle with blends, they typically miss those middle sounds, right? So in the word blend, right? Or in a word that has a weld like bang. They say bang, but when they go to spell it, they're missing that N. They go b-a-ng, and they don't write down that N. So if we stretch out those sounds, they tend to hear it. B-a-ng, bang. And do 1-minute activities. It's something that can be done quick and constant. It's the consistency, doing them all the time. It becomes a routine and the students hear it over and over. So word study is great. I know in Wilson, and this is another part of Kilpatrick's for the orthographic mapping, but in Wilson we also look at vocabulary. We will use those passages, the controlled text or the passages that are in the readers, and find key words that we know students are going to struggle with later on. And we talk about morphology, and we talk about, the Latin bases that are within those words, and how can you help yourself comprehend and understand word patterns. And if you know the meaning of one word with a prefix, if you change it to, from un to pro, and how does that change the word? So we really look into that. We look at words that are alike, words that are similar, cognates, especially for our bilingual students. We teach them to use what you know in your one language to help you with the other language. A lot of those words with the Latin bases help these students have a broader vocabulary. And so he gives some great ideas on, when you get this slideshow, you're going to see that there's some links to some of those chapters that he has in his book to give you some more ideas. So letter sound skill, phonics, you want to provide as many exposures. Again, I've said repetition is key with these students. You want to continually be providing those exposures. And why, when I do the sounds, I don't do the vowels A, E, I, O, U, because that's what they always hear. I might start with O and point to it and be like, O, octopus, ah. And then I point to E, E, ed, ed, so that it is random and then it's never a predictable way. Again, we talked about multisensory methods. You can use clay, you can use shaving cream, you can use gel boards. There's so many things out there that are low cost, don't require a lot of prep, that help students. I think one of the cheapest ways I've done it, or the best ways, was buying sandpaper and students tracing it. Simple, easy. You can use these large screens now that most people have, that you can write the word and the student can trace it nice and big, so that they're using these large movements to help cement the words in there. Yeah, so any questions? That's the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, you have my email. I'm just an email away. You can send that to me. Also, on the end of this, we have some additional resources for you that are great for students that have dyslexia, and for teachers to learn more about what it is to teach a student with dyslexia. So we have some in English, and we have some bilingual resources on here as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.